I want to get straight to our guest since we have a power hour today and there's lots of information. This is a true fan favorite, always has some of the most amazing information, and not to mention he is a host 5 nights a week. That's right, 5 nights a week. That happens to be who everybody requested to come back, the one and only Mr. Sean David Morton. Sean, welcome back, buddy.
How the crowd goes wild. Hey, how are you, Johnny?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great.
And hey to everybody else. Hey to everybody out there. Johnny Webb, how are you? It's all fun. It's all good. Anyway, how are you guys?
Good. So, we have Hillary Clinton, and as you know, Dr. Drew got fired from CNN, and the Huffington Post also got fired for writing a piece about Hillary Clinton's health.
Right.
The problem is that essentially that what happened is you see her having in the video that he released on YouTube after he got fired, which went viral, millions of views. He showed that she was having uncontrollable laughing that is not socially accepted, seizures very many times, and of course, what did you see that day? It wasn't that she was just falling. It looked like she was having a seizure.
No, she had a grand mal seizure. She absolutely had a grand mal seizure that was many of the telltale signs of that were she had another female doctor with long black hair who was standing in front of her holding up 2 fingers, asking Hillary to squeeze her fingers, because that's a check, because I believe is what she saw, because I've known people with Parkinson's, and people with Parkinson's have actually sent me Skypes and emails saying, look, I know what she has. The coughing, you can't control your respiration, because what happens is that it's part of the paralysis, which is why she has these uncontrollable coughing fits. She has 2 doctors that are usually around her. There's a large black man with a bald head named Dr. Okalando. I think it's a very difficult name to pronounce and spell. And then she has another doctor, which you see standing directly behind her as she's getting into the van on 9/11, who also earlier in the day was looking into Hillary's eyes. And what was happening is that Hillary's eyes, before a seizure, your eyes begin to flutter. I mean, your eyes start, kind of going back and forth, and kind of a fluttering. The eyeballs themselves start going back and forth, and sort of a fluttering.
Is this why she's wearing sunglasses all the time?
Yes, the blue sunglasses are basically anti-seizure, because the blue light actually gets into the eyes and helps with the release of serotonin in the eyes. John Lennon used to wear blue sunglasses all the time because it actually releases serotonin, or helps release serotonin. And those are basically anti-seizure sunglasses. So when she was walking around, supposedly with pneumonia, slurping all these old people with possibly contagious pneumonia, this woman was looking in her eyes and asking her to squeeze her 2 fingers, her index finger and middle finger, to see if she had any strength, to see if she was going into a seizure. When she started to go into the seizure, they moved her towards the van. And as she was, what you kind of, it's difficult to see in the video, but as she gets towards the van, now please remember, what she's fitted with is that the reason she wears these big coats and looks like a draped vacuum cleaner or a Vulcan ambassador, these giant things, is because you can see 2 points coming up in the back, which some people have speculated to be a bulletproof vest. But we know that a bulletproof vest comes over the shoulders and then has a Velcro that actually fastens on the upper chest. What these were is that this was a defibrillator unit. It was a mobile defibrillator unit that was probably linked directly to a heart monitor, so that if her heart began to flutter, the defib unit would actually send an electric shock in to keep her heart going. That's how bad it is. So she was wearing these big diapers, these Depends diapers, because she's incontinent. She was wetting her pants. So what we've seen in photographs is that she has because when she's wearing tighter slacks, you can actually see a tube running down her leg, which connects to her lady bits, if you will, that then connects to a clamp. There's actually a clamp in the middle halfway up the thigh, and then a clamp that goes just below the knee that then goes to a urine bag, a colostomy bag, that's actually mounted on her, mounted and braced with these clips on her right calf. So what happens is that, okay, she starts to seize. They cut the ceremony short. They move her towards the van. As she's stepping off the curb into the van, she misses the step, and you see her kind of her head goes back and forth like she's a puppet, like a dog grabs her and starts shaking her, and you see her head going back and forth as she starts to seize. Now, the lady doctor, as she's going towards the van, puts her arms behind her back and asks her to clasp her hands so nobody can see the shaking and the hands beginning to seize, which is what people have misinterpreted as her being arrested or something, that her hands are behind her back because she was cuffed or something, which is, it's complete nonsense. They put her hands behind her back so that she could clasp her hands together so you wouldn't see her fists or her hands as part of the seizure. When she puts her hands out to go into the van, she misses the step into the van, tumbles forward as they have her, and as she hits her shin against the lip of the van, the colostomy bag pops off, and now you see a clip that actually goes down her pant leg and flies into the air, which is what we actually have a still photo of.
Really?
Which is the clip from the colostomy bag. It's a piece of the medical equipment. So now they put her in the van. They stop the 9/11 ceremony, by the way. Then they stop any of the reporters from actually following the van.
That's
and as far as everything we know, she goes directly to
Chelsea's apartment.
No. The van goes to I forget the name of the hospital, but it's I think Montpelier Hospital. The van goes to Montpelier Hospital. Everybody else is told that she goes directly to Chelsea's apartment. Now, there's another bit of misinformation out there, and look, that Chelsea's apartment is listed as the address of a senior care medical facility, which I believe is what it formerly was before they actually turned it into housing. Now, there's a lot of information out there that says it's still listed as the location of a senior care medical facility, but I'm almost positive that they actually turned it into housing at that time. Now, they tell the press that that's where she is. Then, in one of the most outrageous political tricks ever pulled, suddenly this woman who just collapsed, who supposedly has pneumonia, even though and by the way, they made up the pneumonia stuff 2 days later. They didn't even tell you until Tuesday that she had pneumonia. And so now here comes the new Hillary, dancing around. Oh, it's great to be in New York. It's great. What a great day. She actually, by the way, answers all of the questions with the same response like 4 times.
And without wrinkles, wearing sunglasses, yes. And yes. I didn't see any Secret Service guarding her.
Correct.
Like they would anybody else.
Correct. She is dancing. There's nobody around her for 50 yards. Nobody. The Secret Service would never let that happen. Not ever. Then she starts smooching on this little girl, possibly giving her pneumonia, because if she's under 5, they're at risk for pneumonia. And now the new Hillary Clinton is waving to the crowd, who is 35 pounds lighter, who is apparently 15 years younger, who has a completely different jaw, who has no mole on her face, by the way, wearing different earrings, different sunglasses, and now she's suddenly right-handed when Hillary is left-handed because she's wearing her purse on her right arm. It's a double. And now you have, by the way, Megyn Kelly, the Palladian princess of hell, now getting up on Fox News trying to debunk the fact that they so obviously put a double or what I call an LMD, a life model decoy, which is what they use in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So here's our HRC, the LMD dancing around in front of him. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead, Johnny.
No, that's okay. I was just speaking up to the point. I actually got a text question here. It's not a question. It's just something that confirms what you said. This is why she hasn't done any press conferences, because too many people talking to her at once messes her up. Isn't that true?
She hasn't done a press conference in
about a year, right?
200, yeah, almost, but it's 292 days now, I believe.
Yeah.
Now this gets weirder because, once again, she's a different body shape, different weight, earlobe shape is different. She's missing the mole above the right side of her mouth,
and missing wrinkles.
Missing wrinkles. She doesn't have the turkey neck anymore. That's all gone. There were people claiming that it was a British double named Teresa Barndale, but she looks completely different. She's and she was also in Los Angeles that day. And what they make up about her medical condition is that then there's a 2-page letter that was released by her doctor on September 14th, a couple of days later, before they made up this whole thing, claiming she had a mild non-contagious bacterial pneumonia. But according to the International Classification of Diseases, which is called ICD, is a non-existent disease that nobody's ever heard of. So the doctor lies. And Dr. Milton Wolfe, who, by the way, is President Obama's cousin, wrote that the Clinton doctor doesn't know what she's talking about, and that Clinton had an imaging study that doesn't exist. So calling a CTA is a CT or a CAT scan. It's a CAT scan. It's an angiogram. And it always requires contrast and it cannot be included in a non-contrast CT scan. In fact, there's no such thing as a CTA calcium score study. A CT calcium score study is of the coronary arteries, has to have contrast in it, and if you gave contrast, then the coronary calcifications would be masked by the contrast in the arteries. I mean, this is radiology 101. So Hillary's doctor, who says that her health is excellent, just claimed that Hillary had an imaging study that doesn't exist for a disease that doesn't exist and isn't listed anywhere. Now this is where it gets, okay, go ahead.
And if she had pneumonia diagnosed on Friday, then why would she be out on Sunday? And then why would they continue this lie and try to scramble up for what kind of excuse until Tuesday? So you have Friday when the pneumonia diagnosis was suddenly made. Saturday, then you have the 9/11 celebration, or not celebration, it's actually just a memoriam on Sunday. Then you have Monday going on. 5 days later, they tell us about pneumonia. I mean, it sounds to me like they were looking for something like, okay, well, these are the symptoms that everyone saw on TV, so let's figure out what can be linked to it. And I could tell you from having pneumonia and also having pneumonia another time, which actually put me in a coma, it does not go away in 5 days. No way. Well,
intelligence, this is where it gets weirder, because all intelligence agencies, whether or not it's CIA, DIA, SVU, which is the Russian intelligence as well, they know where world leaders are. Intelligence experts always know where top international leaders are located for targeting purposes in case of war. According to all the intelligence agencies, she remained all day in her New York compound in Chappaqua, in upstate New York. She's got this huge, heavily guarded compound. But then the U.S. media actually then has her supposedly at a rally, looking perfectly fine, in Greensboro, North Carolina, but whose appearance there has now been disputed by Americans who've noted that all of the videos of Clinton have all been completely made up and have too many oddities for them to mention. Number one, the whole thing is green screen. Number two, if you look at the people in the front holding up their cell phones to film the event, there's no flags on the podium, there's no Hillary Clinton on the podium, and then when you actually see the speech she gives, if you actually look at the many people power through illness, and that's what I wanted to do, if you go to the 20-minute and 51-second mark, she disappears completely from the video. She pixelates out and disappears from the video. So something's going on where they're green screening the entire thing, and the propaganda U.S. media is hiding the true health status of Clinton. And she had a really grave brain injury that she suffered in December of 2012. And this is one of these classified things, because she was in a C-12 Huron military transport aircraft that crash landed on she was doing a secret mission into Iran to basically help them with the uranium and big chunks of money. And it's this whole deal that her and her best buddy Humma, who I think is funny because she's married to Anthony Weiner, and she wants the people to think that her name is Humma in a bed when her name is really Humma Weiner, which I think is hilarious. But they were near the Iraq border, and this crash killed one of her aides, U.S. Navy Commander Joe Price, and Clinton was injured when the Navy SEAL was killed during that particular crash. And this has been confirmed by the State Department, by the way, because Jay Sullivan actually sent out a report on Hillary's plane crash in Iran, and the email chain shows that U.S. Marine Major Anthony Milovic forwarded to U.S. Navy Captain Les Horn, who basically said that it's absolutely true that they actually had this crash. But the thing is that now, if you study, ever since then, these news conferences and or quote hometown rallies that she's having, I'm not sure they exist. I mean, I'm not sure. Look, there's a good possibility, and I say this with tongue in cheek, but what happens? I mean, let me throw this out there to the crowd. What happens if she's really dead? Yes. What happens if she died Sunday? And I'm not saying that that's absolutely possible, but her health is so bad that in order to continue the campaign, that the media is literally introducing a CGI candidate to you to keep this up. And look, I'm telling you, I do not know how the debates are going to happen, because the debates are September 26th. So here's what's going to happen before then. December 26th is going to come along, and Russian intelligence is going to release a huge number of her emails. Then Julian Assange, who, by the way, was just pardoned by the United Nations, Julian Assange is going to release the worst of the worst of his knowledge of the emails, which is going to include all kinds of stuff from her selling out the country to China and whatever else. And the guy who's running the debates is a former press secretary for the White House. So here's a prediction for you. If the debates occur, I guarantee that they're going to do a quote, relaxed version so that she can sit down. So every accommodation is going to be made to Hillary Clinton. Every obstacle possible is going to be thrown at Donald Trump. And now that you have Twitter and Facebook and Zuckerberg and Eric Schmidt, who, by the way, lives in my house. He actually bought my mother's house when my mom died. So all of Google is being run off Google Mountain, which is in my bedroom in Atherton, California, at 368 Walsh Road, if you ever want to knock on his door. But yeah, Eric Schmidt, he lived right down from us. We would watch Hillary and Bill being serenaded by Elton John on a piano in Schmidt's yard from the balcony of our house. But now all of them are aligned against Trump. All of them are dissing Trump. All of them. But I predicted that if Trump came within 6 points in the election, where he's at now,
correct, or closer, or
and
even closer.
that he would win the election, because you've got to spot him 6 points, because the media is completely controlled against him, and it's going to be interesting to see how it happens, especially now that Hillary, as she's losing the election, she'll blame the basket of deplorables and anybody. And look, I said this before, that the metaphysical Mason-Dixon line that's dividing this country right down the center is going to be what I call the gay, black, and stoned versus the white, well-armed, and really pissed off. And so that's where it's going to be, because no matter what happens, if Trump is elected president, you're going to see the cities, the black populations in cities erupt in riots, and burn them down. And if Hillary gets elected, then I think you're going to start seriously seeing people finally defending their rights, finally going to court, and maybe even the secession of states like Texas and whatever else. I mean, it's just one way or another, it's just going to be chaos. So Civil War II. I think that's what we're looking at now, and it's going to be one of those things. Although, let me tell you this: people that are talking about the system collapsing, please let me remind you that this system, that's like being mad that the South collapsed. Oh no, slavery's going to go away. So since we have a system that's based completely on debt slavery, and now the banks are in this death spiral because they've printed so much money that they're so far in debt with their own money that something has to happen, some kind of revaluation, some kind of collapse of the banks to be replaced with a system that actually is generating money that's based on something. And guess and the people that are leading this revolution are the Chinese, because the Chinese have come out and now backed the Chinese yuan with gold, which means that every other currency on earth, in order to continue to be viable, is going to have to step up and possibly revalue, which is going to make a lot of people very rich.
I also love what Trump said. If she wants to take away the Second Amendment, first of all, no gangbanger out there goes and buys legal guns. Yeah, right. They buy ghost guns made from the Philippines. They take stolen guns. How do you think an Uzi or an AK-47 gets in the hands of the Crips and the Bloods and all these other gangs?
What I tell people about gun control is that in order to win the hearts and minds, you've got to change the language and change the semantics, because here's what happens. The minute somebody gets shot, or the minute some crazy man opens fire with a gun or does whatever, the first knee-jerk reaction, by the way, of the government or the liberal press is to start screaming about, oh, we need to take guns away, we need more gun control. Okay, so here's the language that we have to start using. Gun control punishes the innocent. So that's what they're doing. They punish the innocent. Why are you going to punish me and take my gun away because some crazy guy? We've gotten out of the idea that we punish the person that actually does the thing. I got in an argument with Sarah Brady where she was like, oh, a gun did this to my husband and made him a cripple. I'm like, no, a gun didn't do that. Some crazy man did.
Yes, guns don't shoot people. Yeah, people do.
He should have been hung and lit on fire. He should have been hung from a tree and lit on fire. And instead he goes to a nice, cushy mental institution in upstate New York because his father was business partners with George Bush Sr. for 30 years. And they just let the son of a bitch out 2 weeks ago, for God's sakes. And the guy that tried to shoot... that claimed he showed up at an event to try to kill Trump, they let that son of a bitch out too. So, anyway, it's just crazy. So let's talk about the Pentagon stuff, because there's way more stuff.
Before we do, I just got a really interesting text quote here from you. It says, Rand Paul has been ratcheting up the talk about U.S. being the big arms dealer, feeding guns to both sides in the Mideast. Paul is challenging the arms deal to the Saudis. And also, let me say this. If Hillary is successful in putting Supreme Court justices in there that will overturn the Second Amendment or find a way to block it, which it shouldn't be, because the whole point of the U.S. Supreme Court is to defend the Constitution, not to alter it. The gang members and cartel members are going to jump for joy. They're going to be like, "Wait, yay! We don't have any competition."
Well, Hillary's actually stated that if she's elected, that she'll make Barack Obama a Supreme Court justice. She's actually said that.
What do you know about the arms deal? Can you tell us about it? Arms deals going around?
The United States is the biggest arms deal in the world. It's basically our only export. That's all we do is make guns and bombs and planes. And remember, the Clinton Foundation was key in that, because the Saudi Arabians, they contributed $35 million to the Clinton Foundation, and they got missiles. Yemen contributed $25 million to the Clinton Foundation, and they got missiles and guns. And so you can look at every single arms deal that went down, and every single one of them was prefaced with pay to play, with, okay, you donate money to the Clinton Foundation. The biggest one of these is that a man by the name of Seth Rich, a young guy, 28 years old, was an executive with the DNC, and he was going to the FBI with emails that he found that showed that Hillary Clinton, number one, was going to open up the White House to a pay or play. So when she becomes president, she basically would say every seat on the cabinet was that they would have to bribe her to get in. So Monsanto, Monsanto just got bought by Bayer Aspirin for $666 billion, $666 million, $666. It was all sixes, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And Bayer just buys Monsanto. So Bayer, you want to be head of agriculture? That'll be X number of dollars for you to that.
Are you talking about Bear Stearns?
No, I'm talking about Bayer Aspirin. Bayer Aspirin bought Monsanto
gotcha.
for $666 billion, $666.
Insane.
So she will open up the cabinet to say, Goldman Sachs, you want to be Commerce Secretary, Monsanto, Bayer, you want to be Agriculture Secretary, who wants to run Interior, and every single one of these will be open to these giant corporations that want to contribute to her getting more money. These people are career criminals. She's a supervillain. She is a murderess on a scale that you can't imagine. And between Bush and Obama driving the getaway car and Hillary Clinton, we have invaded and destroyed 11 countries since 2001. 11 countries. We bombed them to smithereens. We've killed millions of people. We've made millions more homeless, and now they're showing up at our front door wanting to get in because we blew up their houses, and we're somehow mad about that. So anyway, that's my soapbox for today.
Before we get into the Pentagon, because I know we've already halfway through this hour, yes. I wanted to ask you, there's a big vote going on tomorrow about these arms. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, what you mean, the arms deals for everybody? Well, it's going to go through because Bernie Sanders is also a tool of the military-industrial complex.
Yes.
And how are you going to stop it? Again, it's an ecological balance. It's an ebb and flow. There's been billions of dollars taken out of this country, and they put it back. And the way they put it back is by buying our weapons. And they buy bombs and guns and planes and whatever else. And that's what we do. We're the arms dealer of the world. You understand that we're Babylon. We've become the beast of Babylon. And look, if you're into biblical prophecy, and you want the apocalypse, and you want the tribulation, and you want the rapture, and you want the whore who sits upon the beast of Babylon, Hillary Clinton's your girl. She's your girl. She's the whore in the red dress, in the red scarlet gown, who sits on the Babylonian beast. So maybe it fractures into timelines. Maybe some people will go through one timeline where everything is all wonderful, and I don't know, Trump becomes president, and there's another timeline where people just go screaming down to hell, where Hillary becomes president. Maybe they both win in alternative timelines. But I'm telling you, you want to look at every prophecy in Revelation in the New Testament. Hillary is perched to fulfill them all.
Now, if before we get to Pentagon, if Hillary was to win, what's going to happen if we have a dead president? I mean, is it going to go to McCain? Or Kane? Sorry, not McCain. Kane.
Well, here's an interesting theory for you. Why did she pick Tim Kaine? Tim Kaine is a conservative, anti-abortion, old-school Democrat who also happens to be a Jesuit. He's Opus Dei, along with the Supreme Court justices and whatever else. So therefore, you have a guy who's a Jesuit Catholic, anti-abortion Jesuit Catholic as her running mate. let's say she dies, because one of two things is going to get in if Hillary gets in. I guarantee you, she will either be dead from the diseases that she has within a year, and you and I all know that she's going to be impeached by the Republican Congress and Senate, and probably go to jail. So all of these, I don't know why people understand this, that the presidency is going to be void, because as soon as she gets in, the Republican Congress and the Senate are going to indict her, and they are going to impeach her, exactly like her husband, for lying. And on Monday, the FBI appeared before Congress, and the FBI guy was saying, well, I can't answer this and I can't answer that. And the head, what was the guy, Zeifman? The head of the committee said to him, okay, are you able to be subpoenaed? And he said, yes. And he says, then I am hereby subpoenaing you now. Are you empowered to take service on behalf of the FBI? Yes, I am. He says, here's the subpoena. Consider yourself served. That was last Monday. And on Monday, that means the Congress has now subpoenaed the entire behind-the-scenes investigation of the FBI. But here's the problem. The FBI, if they start tearing this apart, you have to understand how deep the Clinton Foundation goes. Every single one of these people contributed to it. The Clintons have used humanitarian acts like Haiti, as an example, to launder billions of dollars. And by the way, they have dirt on everybody because they run sex parties, they run sex girls, they run prostitutes. They had Pedophile Island with the guy that had the 16-year-old girls that all flew down to the island. These guys are all boofing. So they've got dirt on all these people. And if the FBI starts going after Hillary, then it leads to the Clinton Foundation. If it leads to the Clinton Foundation, it leads to the black books that has all the dirt on everybody in Washington. And you could wipe out the government as we know it. And the FBI is standing there being the only really law enforcement agency. And their whole thing is, if we open this up, we go against every member of Congress and every person in the Senate, because they're all sick frickin' pedophiles, all these people.
Yeah, and that's the problem. The FBI, the director Comey, when he was, in the Senate hearing, he said that he's basically a stooge, backing her up in every single way. When he was asked by one of the senators, "Have you looked into the Clinton Foundation?" he basically denied it. He says, and the senator, well, he basically said,
he said it was beyond the scope of our investigation.
Yes. So the senator said, well, then, in your research of the email scandals, did you come by? Did it come across through or link to the Clinton Foundation?
Right.
And what did he say? He says, I can't answer that.
Beyond the scope of our investigation, I can't answer that, sir.
Yeah.
Now, when they interviewed Hillary, please remember that she did so without being under oath, and there was no recording done of it. So that was her two conditions, that you can't record it and it's not under oath either. So that's that. Let's get into the other stuff, because this $600 million.
Pentagon.
We've only got half an hour. All right, now look. I ran this past one of my high-level military guys. And, a guy that ran a bunch of these programs who, got shot like 7 times on a mission and all this stuff. Now, it is interesting because I also sent him a copy of the Fulford report, which opens with Hillary Clinton is dead. But Ben Fulford says and does a lot of kind of outrageous stuff. So I sent this to him, and this was his response. He said, because I asked him, one of the main fleet ships that we have that I saw with my own eyes because it flew over my head when I was out on a trip to Area 51. This thing is 1,600 foot from tip to tail. It's got a blunt shovel nose on it. Looks like 2 door wedges kind of put together, and the back part of it is scooped like an old-style Corvette with these 3 big retros on the back of it. And this thing came in from space, and in 92 and 93, it was actually coming in from space because it was miscalibrated somehow, and they were landing it at Area 51, and when it was coming in, it was actually creating 3.5 earthquakes on the ground, which Caltech actually started calling skyquakes. It was all over the news where Bill Moyers said this thing landed at Area 51, but what they were trying to tell you is they were trying to say there was two craft that were traveling at above Mach 25 that were then landing at 5-1. And I'm telling you, it was a single ship that when the ass end of this thing broke the sound barriers when the first quake came through, and it was so big because it was about 1,600 feet from tip to tail, that as the shockwave rolled across the front, it took a second or two because it went, and then you heard about 2-3 seconds, and then the second one was as the front part of the ship broke the sound barrier, and Caltech called it a skyquake. I was in my house in Hermosa Beach when the roof started shaking, and then the windows, and then the floor, and it was like an earthquake in reverse. So I'm out at 5-1 with my friend John Hadley, who they later murdered. And it was the only time ever that we were actually chased by the Wackenhut guys when we just said, we got to go. And we managed to get away from them. We managed to hide actually in the town of Rachel. We actually made it before them. But this thing's 1,600 feet from tip to tail, and it's called the USS Grissom. And the Grissom has 2 support frigates that are about 600 feet or so. And then there's at the time there were 4 Vipers. The Vipers are the big jet black triangles that you see that have impulse sublight capabilities. They can go about 7/10 of the speed of light, which is pretty damn fast. But the Grissom actually has the power to warp. So the Grissom and the USS John Glenn and the USS Alan Shepard were the 3 main ships that we had. Now, this is where it gets weird, because I asked my friend about the disappearing money. And he says, I asked him, did the Grissom crash? And he said the USS Grissom did not crash. However, fleet operations are expanding, and someone has to pay for it. It sure can't be a line item in the general budget, can it now? So where else could it come from, with the exceptions of the guys running the show? That would be the group, and this is exactly what my books are about. And people were saying, where do you get the money for this? Well, guess what? The Pentagon budget per year is about $650 billion. Now, that represents 45 to 50% of the entire budget of the federal government, whereas the Pentagon is the largest single employer on Earth. And they've taken 50% of the federal budget for almost 70 years now. And people wonder where the money comes from to build these giant underground bases, and to build bases on the moon, and to build all these starships and whatever else. So here he says, reason. With the Chinese putting up all the modules for its new space platform up into space already, which clearly is designed with multiple roles intended, they have moved the Cold War into LEO, and LEO stands for Low Earth Orbit. This violates all kinds of treaties, but so what? Best guess is that one of those roles will be the installation of what's called the Finger of God, which is the Finger of God is it's a gigantic space-based weapon that I've seen YouTube video of it being used on the coast of Iran, where you see this giant finger of flame come out of the sky, and it cooked all these dolphins. You can just look up Finger of God on the internet. And also, a Finger of God device was used by the United States to induce the earthquakes in Turkey that happened in August of 1999, which killed about 50,000 people there. The reason for that is that the Russians and all these other Eastern European countries wanted to terminate their pipeline in the Bosphorus Sea in Turkey. And if you want to know more about it, then I suggest you go on Netflix and you actually rent the James Bond movie called The World Is Not Enough, which stars Denise Richards and Pierce Brosnan. The plot of that movie is exactly what was happening at the time. And it was in the can and finished. The movie came out in November of '99, but it had been finished months before. And the ending of the movie is the Russian villain wants to explode the nuclear pile of a submarine in the Bosphorus so that all these pipelines could terminate in Turkey. And yet that's exactly what happened with the Finger of God that was actually used to induce those earthquakes there. So the Finger of God is a space-borne countermeasure against the United States is pushing the carrier fleet as the major deterrent against Chinese expansion. When you talk about the carrier fleet, we're talking about the Grissom, we're talking about the John Glenn, about the Alan Shepard. He says, so the U.S. has to counter that with, 1, a neutralizing system to be used preemptively, or 2, its own, what they call an FOG system, aimed at vital targets, Finger of God, their own Finger of God system, aimed at vital targets inside the safety boundary, which is not only deep within China, but the other thing the Finger of God is designed to do as well, is actually hit underground facilities. And of course, the underground facilities are anywhere between 50 and 300 feet underground. So that was his response to maybe where this went. But this completely proves my Sands of Time books, which also culminates, by the way, the reason the Eisner Protocol finally culminates in 2006 with our finally figuring out time travel. And once we've now figured out time travel and been able to miniaturize it, because we had power problems and transport problems, we've been able to use mass, move mass, and teleport mass, probably with the early Montauk project, anywhere between 63 and 65 or so. But what eluded us is that we could not teleport, nor could we allow anything to travel through time that was organic, and especially human beings. We tried it over and over and over again, and all kinds of bad things happened. You heard about what happened to the people on the USS Eldridge, the Philadelphia experiment, which actually called Project Rainbow, that guys phased into the decks, and the other guys who survived were misaligned. Let's say that the subtle energies of their bodies, the causal field, the astral field, the auric field of the body as well, was now misaligned with the time stream, which is why these guys just kind of disappeared into nothing, or because what was happening is it kind of sucks you. When we tried the time travel stuff, it grabs onto your causal field first, because you have a 7-chakra energy field, but every chakra has 7 chakras as well. So it starts out way out there where you're interacting with the time field, which is called the causal field. And then you have the causal field, the etheric field, the astral field, the spiritual field, the emotional field, the mental field, and then the physical field. So what was happening with time travel was it grabbed onto the etheric field, which was closest to the creation of time, because we're all creating time as we interact with it, and it would suck that through the oculus, so you'd come out the other side basically put together inside out. So that was the challenge, is we finally, and we learned the trick behind all of this was this really humble little device that we had sitting in front of us for almost 70 years, that in 1945 was invented by this little guy named Captain Hans Kohler. And you can look it up online. You can look up the MI6 and MI5 reports of an interview with Hans Kohler. And Kohler put together this little box that you can build at Radio Shack. And he put together this box that if you put a volt into it, it generates 12 volts of energy. Well, MI6 said, okay, he's legit and the box works, but we just can't figure out what to do with it. So once we figured out that the Kohler device could actually generate the kind of energy that we needed for a man-portable time travel device, we also learned that the Kohler device could create a shield around not just the human body, but it create a bubble, if you will, that would actually protect the time traveler and create and seal in the etheric, the edges of the etheric and all the other astral and subtle auric fields that then allowed us to be able to put a man through time.
And 28 years ago, Bob Lazar was even saying, if you can control gravity, you will affect the space-time continuum, right. In essence, giving you time travel.
Yes. Well, that's the biggest key to everything is Newtonian physics, Einsteinian physics, every physics that we have directly relate to what gravity does. But nothing tells you what it is. And once you understand what gravity is, and you can create gravity as either a wave or a particle, then that means that you now control not only space but time, because now you can bend space, but you can also bend time at the same. But here's the trick. The trick is sending a person through time is way harder than sending something metallic or something inorganic, because we kept transporting just the meat suit, just the flesh, and not really understanding that you have to teleport the subtle bodies as well as the physical meat, if you will, of the body, which is why everything was getting all screwed up. So as far as a ship goes, technically it does manipulate time, because it reaches through another dimension, grabs onto a piece of space, bends the space towards it, moves into the other space, turns off the gravity amplifier, and then space snaps back to its original size and shape. So you get to where you want to go. Theoretically, you've traveled through time because you instantaneously appear at the space you want to go without having to go through time to be able to do it. One of the reasons why Ted Humphrey, in my books, ordered Project Pounce, which is our craft retrieval guys, to bring everything from all over everywhere, from the Kalahari, from the right hangar base, to bring everything to Area 51, and then build the Papoose S4 facility. Now a lot of stuff's being done out of what they call there's A1 through 6. The Viper craft are actually stored at A6. But the reason they built the Papoose facility and why they got the 9 ships in the first place was because when they climbed in the ships, they began to realize not so much the power source, but the ships themselves had the ability to actually dilute and manipulate time. So that when you got in the ship, and it's kind of weird because they couldn't figure out how to work them, until somebody just got in and sat down on this little football-shaped device, and then the thing expands into like a big couch, like a beanbag, because the whole thing just goes and just kind of envelops your body. Nobody had actually sat in the thing, because when you actually sit in it, that's when the control panels would all go on. You had to actually sit in the craft, and everybody was afraid to do that. And then they realized that you could be in the craft for like a minute, and 20 hours would pass outside, or you could be in the craft literally for a couple of hours, which they've done, and the people on the outside would experience no change in time. So they realized that the ships themselves could dilate and manipulate the time stream, which is another reason why we got them at 5-1 to study them in the first place. Now most of it's gone. They've I don't know what they do there now. They've moved everything to a brand new facility under Kings Peak in Utah. Everything's up in Utah now. Actually, originally it was at Area 6413 when they moved all the 5.1 stuff. Now they're just doing stealth fighters and big wings and Vipers and things there. But most of the ships and the craft have been moved to the new U.S. Space Command facility under Kings Peak in Utah. And by the way, they're doing commercials now. I don't know if you've seen them or not, but U.S. Space Command is actively recruiting. And they do commercials where they say, the U.S. Space Command, it's just like serving on a ship.
Wow. Unbelievable. And I've seen a YouTube video where it showed all the official logos of the secret space programs, which none of them said secret. And there's just so many of them, and it just boggles my mind how you go from not knowing any of them to all of a sudden finding out there's several.
Well, there's dozens and dozens. Yeah. There's actually a book you can buy. It's a black book that actually has a lot of the patches in it of these things. And of course, the latest NSA patch, which is really scary, is a giant octopus like eating the Earth, and that was on the new satellite that the NSA just put up, which I think is interesting because the NSA was heavily involved with the Facebook guys, and they were putting up the SpaceX rocket, which was I don't know, it was a UFO, but it was destroyed. That SpaceX rocket was destroyed by some kind of advanced laser.
Now, let's talk about the actual space programs, because Dr. Michael Salla was on not too long ago, and he was saying that even before Hitler went to Antarctica, which so many documentaries are now, even on National Geographic, Discovery, History, you name it, that the body that they found was clearly not of Adolf Hitler. He suggested that the first space program, secret space program, was run by the Nazis. What do you know about that?
Well, everything, because our new production company is working on we're working on a 6-part TV series, actually all about the period of time. And again, I think I've said this before on the program. If you look at the history of the 20th century, the biggest mystery is how you go from the First World War, which is fought to a standstill because of disease, to between 1917 and, 1945, but even earlier than that. But within less than maybe 20 years, you have the Germans actually developing interplanetary craft. Look, in 1945, Eisenhower was absolutely right when he said, if we'd waited 6 more months to win the war, then the Germans would have won. They had atomic weapons, which we captured their German scientists. We sent them to the Manhattan Project, and they taught the stupid American scientists how to actually build atomic bombs, which we then used on Japan. But when we captured Germany, we had to rewrite our technical manuals because they had 750,000 new words for stuff, technical stuff that we didn't even have words for. I challenge you that every single aircraft design we have today, the SST, the supersonic transport, the YF-11, the F-117, F-117A, the stealth bomber, the DC-10, the 747, every single one of these was designed by the Germans before 1945. All of it. The backpack, the sound cannon, the lasers. The only thing they didn't have was the stuff that dropped off the Roswell craft, which was integrated circuits, which were not invented by Shockley. Shockley claims his team came across them after, of course, they got a prototype from the Pentagon, from their Foreign Technology Division. So there comes integrated circuits. That leads to computers, which then leads to lasers, also, which came off the Roswell crash, and also night vision, which was then dropped into Bell Laboratories because they took the lens off one of the aliens' eyes, all this stuff. But if you actually look at where it goes, you can trace all of their technology back to a psychic from Zagreb by the name of Maria Orsic. And you guys should look her up. She's absolutely gorgeous. She had a group of 5 women called the
Football Society, wasn't she? The Black Sun Worshippers.
Well, but they actually had a group called the Vrilldamen. And the Vrilldamen were dedicated to giving the Germans what they called the Rumflügen. And Rumflügen meant space flight. And they had very long hair because they believed, and hair like down to their knees and ankles, because they believed that the hair was psychic tendrils that allowed them to connect. They also channeled naked and sometimes had to be actually sexually manipulated by these German soldiers. So it's quite the show.
Wasn't she a Palladian of some kind?
I can't tell you about that. I just know she came from Zagreb. She certainly looks Palladian. But when she originally was channeling, she was channeling a spiritual mentor to Rudolf Hess and Hitler, named Eckhart. And then suddenly Eckhart said, I must go away, another force is coming. And then suddenly they claim this sort of heaviness entered the room, and she began to channel beings who called themselves the Sumer, and that the Sumer came from Aldebaran, and which of course is the Eye of Taurus, and that the Aldebaranians had actually colonized Persia 500 million years before, and that they were there because they wanted to actually impart scientific information. Well, Hess was completely out of his depth. So he then goes and he gets the guy who's the leader of the Thule Society, a guy by the name of von Z. Bottendorf. And von Z. Bottendorf comes in and listens to her, and now he's out of his depth too, saying, I must get some scientists. So he starts bringing scientists in. And then she starts writing in Sumerian cuneiform, which is then confirmed. And then she starts actually writing out diagrams and scientific information, all under with her eyes closed with automatic writing. And now Hess brings in these scientists, and the scientists start actually using the plans. Once Hitler gets involved, and the two of them then get a little juice going. Remember, this was the 20s now, so they're not really in it. But once Hitler becomes Chancellor of Germany, then he starts putting the might and weight of the German government and money, and eventually the Reich, behind the designs and all the stuff that Maria Orsich was bringing. Of course, he also had guys like Victor von Schauberger, who invented the implosion drive, who also invented all these plane designs and all kinds of crazy things. But
he invented the Hanabu 1, 2, 3, and 4, which were crafts. So they run BMW engines.
But that was BMW Messerschmitt, yes, who were building them. But you got a little bit confused because Schauberger later came to the United States with a company out of Texas, and they were actually trying to build his implosion drives, which is kind of interesting because then when you about the late 40s and early 50s, now you have on the scene, you have George Adamski. And George Adamski is giving you cutaway looks at the engines inside the supposedly Venusian and Saturnian flying saucers, and they're actually Mercury drives. And the Mercury drives you can now trace back directly to, Hanabu 1, 2, and 3 and all that. And apparently the way they actually achieved the Rumflugen that they're talking about was they built the guy that eventually took over all the programs was Hans Kammler, and Hans Kammler had 14 million people enslaved under him at one time, and he was the Obergruppenführer and the second in command in the Third Reich, and he was the most powerful man in all of Europe, actually, outside of Berlin, because Hitler was there. But it was Kammler that was the one that built the 9 secret saucer bases. But Kammler, he rose to the head of this group, basically the SS, because he found a crashed UFO in the Black Forest, and they managed to pull what they call the Nazi bell out of this crashed UFO. And the way they used the energies of it was the bell, when it was activated, actually had this, well, first off, it wiped out everything around it with this purple radiation, just turned everything to dust. But it also gave off waves of time energy that they call solitons. And so what they did was that they built these big concrete rings. They would chain up the bell in the center. Then they would actually take the Hanabu, which is about 100 meters across or so, float this thing over the top or resting on the top of it. Then by activating the bell would then create the vortex that actually allowed the Hanabu to physically travel to Aldebaran. And they did this, I think, 3 times. And on the 4th time, the ship came back, and the soliton radiation had gotten into the ship, and everybody was turned into skeletons, and it looked like it had aged 100 years or so. And the very last thing they did with it was in Waldenburg in December. It was like December 6th of 1944, and this is actually in my my Iceberg Protocol book. And they tried to actually unleash this thing again, and the bell got loose and ripped open the top of this mountain and ripped this huge gash in time-space. And it actually dragged a bunch of people with it who were kind of hanging onto the chain trying to stop this thing. And as it went through this rip in the sky, it landed in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania in December of 1964, I think it was. And it was actually then recovered by the group then. So they actually, had the bell. But that's when they lost it, was 1844. And as far as the doubles you were talking about, there were 9 doubles actually made of Hitler, where they broke their legs, they broke their backs in the same places. And Hitler was long gone. Actually, by late 1943, as early as the spring of 1944, when they realized that they'd lost the war, Hitler was gone. And my evidence for this would be is that arguably, for as evil and as awful as Hitler was, you could probably say that he was one of the greatest orators of the 20th century. I mean, this is a guy that could whip crowds into frenzies, had this weird style because his mother was Italian. His first language was Italian. So when he spoke German, he spoke it with this kind of Italian inflection, and he moved his body and moved his arms. I mean, nobody just hypnotized crowds like Hitler. And yet Hitler did not give a single public speech after December of 1943. Not one. You would think he would rally his country, and you'd think he'd rally the troops, and no, all he did was walk around and shake hands with people. And they regurgitated stuff that they probably recorded on the radio earlier. So as far as I can tell, Hitler was either in, and there's two theories of this that I think there's two bodies of information for. One is that he went to Patagonia, lived out his life fairly comfortably there, lived to be about 80, 90 years old. Another was that he actually went along the Odessa-file rat line and was actually then taken into the Vatican, because we have a Catholic priest that appears 1945 or so. He takes his novitiate in the Vatican, and he just appears fully blown, named Father Crespi. And Crespi is then sent to Ecuador, and it's in Ecuador that he becomes a Salsidian priest. And the evidence of Wendell Stevens and groups of people was that Crespi had artwork that belonged to Hitler, and he was identified as Hitler by the woman Magda Stapleford, whose real name was Zeitfeld, I think it was, but she identified him as being Hitler because of a painting that he had, and that her family, her father and her brother, had actually performed the plastic surgery on Hitler, Martin Bormann, and one other man that she hadn't heard before, had never seen before. But we have some interesting interviews on her where she says Father Crespi was the lost treasure of the Nazis, which was an article I wrote some time ago that I keep having quoted back to me over the internet, which is kind of funny because I'm the one that wrote the article.
And also, Sean, I understand Hitler's mother spoke fluent Italian, and so did he. So when he was actually in the presence of Mussolini, he was speaking fluent Italian to him.
Correct. That's why you never saw an interpreter between him and Mussolini, because he spoke Italian.
Now, speaking of body doubles, let's talk about the presidential body doubles, because I've heard this has been going on for maybe even as early as George Washington, just like election rigging.
It is interesting because Adam Weishaupt supposedly was a double for Thomas Jefferson. There are some people who claim that Weishaupt and Jefferson actually traded places. There was an article in the Toronto newspapers, which actually ran a photo saying that, a story in an article saying that not only was Obama in town for some conference, but that he brought his body double with him. And they actually got, like, late at night, this kind of weird, rare photo of Obama standing next to a guy that looks just like him, using the body double. There's the other possibility, too. Let me give you a really freaky deaky possibility here. That let us say, theoretically, hypothetically, that the President of the United States is gay. Apparently his body double is not. His body double really likes girls. And not only was Michelle very angry with Obama when he was flirting with the very hot blonde Prime Minister of Denmark, but you'll remember that a woman showed up at the White House with a baby in the back. I believe her name was Mary Carey, I think it was, and she was shot by the D.C. police and the Secret Service. Very weird case where she came up to the front with this baby in the back of the car, and she was a dental hygienist who had actually worked on. She was brought in with a colonel to work on Obama's teeth when something happened to him. He was playing golf, and you have to have all these classifications, obviously, to put your hands in the mouth of the president. And she was the dental hygienist who had struck up this apparent romance with whichever Obama this was, and had a baby by him, and pulled up with the baby. And there was another man in the car, actually, but as she pulled up, you'll see that this woman with a child in the back is actually shot at 9 times by the D.C. cops before she pulls away. And then she's stopped on a road and executed. You should look into this, because she was a dental hygienist. Her sister was a NYPD detective, and they were trying to sue the Secret Service and the Washington police that they would open fire on a woman with a child in the car, and nobody ever knows what happened to the man that was in the car with her. But the theory is that she showed up at the White House with Obama's kid. And not only was it the kid, but it may have actually been the kid of the body double, which actually would have opened a whole big can of worms. Maybe. I don't know. So, because then it gets into Obama's children, and his children don't have birth certificates either. So we don't know where the kids come from. So not only does Barack Obama have a birth certificate, but neither of his kids have U.S. birth certificates either.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And I love how this is what's crazy. For the last 5 years, Trump has been talking about the fact that he was born in Kenya. Where's the birth certificate?
Yes.
Why did he all of a sudden come out a couple of days ago saying President Barack Obama was born in the United States? End of story. I mean,
he's not going to the press. The press is now warming to the fact that this guy might just be elected president of the United States. Therefore, he's making a series of meaningless overtures to the press to basically say, okay, look, I just want to tell you guys that if I get in, sorry, hang on one second. Now look, if you look at Trump, all these people that have this hatred for Trump, let me point out that in 30 years of business and him making $11+ billion and getting stuff from his father, Frederick. I think it's interesting. His father's name is Frederick Christ Trump. Christ is his middle name. I don't think nobody's ever pointed that out. But Frederick Christ Trump, who actually changed his name from Darumph when he came from Scotland, I think it was. Remember, he has been in the last 30 years. Until he started running against Hillary Clinton and the Democratic machine, nobody ever called him a racist. Nobody ever said he was a bigot. Nobody ever said that he hated women. He's handed out millions of dollars in prizes and scholarships to women that have won the contest. There's I think a Hispanic woman that runs his hotel empire. Nobody has given women and people in unions and whatever else and minorities opportunities like Donald Trump has. But he has been the big giant alternative media middle finger, because he has the balls to speak up. And remember, he took on Barack Obama on the birth certificate issue. This was an issue that got Lou Dobbs fired from the network that he started on CNN when he mentioned this 6 times. He's gone up against the pharmaceutical industries by saying that vaccines are bad and we shouldn't give 36 vaccines to little kids before they're before they're 5 years old, and that autism is the cause of that autism is being caused by vaccines, which the FDA has now finally admitted. So look at all the alternative stuff that he's talked about, including building the wall between here and Mexico, which is already voted on and already paid for 10 years ago, but nobody was willing to pull the trigger.
And not to mention Hillary talked about that in the early Clinton years.
Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton were the first birthers, because what happened was that she went to the Bilderberg meeting in May of 2008. They met in Chantilly, Virginia at the Bilderberg meeting, and it was the Rockefellers versus the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds wanted Barack Obama because George Soros knew that they could get away with more with a black president, and that they could institute all the stuff and use white guilt, and anybody that accused them would be accused of a racist, et cetera, et cetera. And you have the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, where the Rothschilds are trying to build the same prison as the Rockefellers, but the Rothschilds will give you a blanket and a pillow and some health care, and if you kind of take care of the sheep, a little better, then you'll get more work out of the sheep, because the Rothschilds have set up places like France and Canada, which have healthcare systems, and they're cages, but they're pleasant cages. Whereas the Rockefellers, their front corporation was the Soviet Union. Their front corporation killed 125 million people over the course of the 20th century in the 79 years of the Soviet Empire. And when the Soviet Union went bankrupt, it was David Rockefeller who was writing the checks at the end, who was the trustee of the bankruptcy. So Trump has been the middle finger of the alternative media for all these causes, mind you. And then you have the alternative media like hating his guts, which I think is really weird. I mean, he's really gone to bat for a lot of things that we know are true. So I think what's happening now is that now that they understand that Hillary, and please remember, probably the most momentous thing to occur after Hillary collapsed on September 11th, is that if she really just had pneumonia, the very next day, the Democratic National Committee was having emergency meetings on how to replace Hillary as a candidate. You don't do that if your candidate just has pneumonia. You do that if you're worried your candidate's dead or going to die.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And that is exactly what we have to worry now. Now, since we went a little bit over, and I know this is half a show, you're absolutely going to be back. You have to be a regular, because everybody loves what you say.
Thanks.
And so let's go full circle. Let's go back to what the Pentagon is supposed to have, which is $600 billion budget. Yet now they can't account for $6.5 trillion, which is 10.5 times the amount.
Yes. Yeah. And they just we lost it. Yeah. Really? So what I'm telling you is that, look, sands of time, You can go on Amazon to get it. If you come on my website, which is strangeuniverseradio.com, if you buy it from us, I'd appreciate it because we save like $7 or whatever. But it's rated 5-star on Amazon. There's some of the best books that you'll ever read. We've got something like 1,000 memoirs. I'm sorry, reviews out there from people that just say that the books are riveting. They're fantastic. I've written now 5 books because I have Black Seraph, which are turning into a movie. I've got The Dark Prophet, which predicted everything that's going on in the Middle East. It's all about the Jesuits and the Vatican and what would happen if Islam suddenly just invaded Europe through mass immigration, which is happening now. And I wrote this book back in 2009. We're making movies out of those. Hopefully, we've got a budget for about $100 million to turn Sands of Time 1, 2, and 3 into either, once again, a TV series or movies. Again, hoping it's all Hollywood. You don't count your chickens before they hatch, or your checks until they actually clear the bank. But Sands of Time are some of the best books you'll read, I guarantee. And if you go to strangeuniverseradio.com or listen to my show, Strange Universe Radio, which is Monday through Friday on freedomslips.com, everything is about we're in an age of chaos, and the things that are going to happen. Let me just warn you that be very careful coming up the last week of October. The whole Ring of Fire is going to light up with a lot of earthquakes, and I want you guys to be ready for that. Also, right before October 1st, there's going to be some major economic news that's going to be coming out that's going to have a lot to do with revaluations of the currencies and a global reset that's going to be based on the Chinese actually stepping up with putting gold in the yuan. So protect yourself financially. You need to probably have gold and silver.
The only thing left is, like you said, gold and silver. So I'm glad you mentioned that because there's been a lot of talk about this lately. It's been really, really bizarre.
Well, I think we might also be getting to a reality of a revalue, even though I haven't believed in this for forever. But the dinar and the Zimbabwean $1 trillion bill and all that stuff, there might actually be some actual evidence behind a revaluation of the dinar, which and you can get for like $300. You can get, if the dinar does revalue, you've got like $1 million in your hand. So let me also say that the chaos that you're seeing is about the social, political, and economic system that is based on oppression, that is based on slavery, about ready to break apart. So, people would say, oh, it's so horrible what happened to the South. Well, the Southern system changed in order to get rid of the slavery aspect of it. And so it's a slave system that's now finally breaking apart. We should be happy that this is happening. Also, from the spiritual aspect, for the first time in 26,000 years, we no longer have a veil on the right-hand side of the brain, which means everything that's coming out is about dance, fluidic movement, color, activation of quantum time. So we're all getting more psychic, more sensitive. And I just have to say, my closing shot is the Maya. Every civilization has a motto. And that's the Egyptians was as above, so below, as within, so without. The Greeks was know thyself. The Romans was to thine own self be true. The motto of the great American civilization will probably be more is better. If I just had more of something, it'd be better. But the Maya had an interesting thing where they said all is one, which means we're biologically connected to each other, we're chemically connected to the earth, and we're atomically connected to the universe. That life has purpose, which means no matter how many low kicks, dirty tricks, or rotten licks you take, you're in the exact right moment in time, at the exact right point in space, to be the hero that you need to be, to save the lives that you need to save, and to save your own. And of course, if God is love, then that means that the prima mobile, the first thought of the universe, is that all things work together for good for them that love God, for them that are chosen according to his purpose. And we all live happily ever after. The end. Thanks for having me on the show.
Amen. Sean David Morton, everybody. Thank you so much.